Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Edward Elgar Publishing Limited. They're an independent publishers and they produce some very high quality publications, many of which are directly relevant to practitioners. This one I thought was particularly important because it's dealing with counter-terrorism. The title of the book is Using Human Rights to Counter Terrorism. It's been edited by two people, Manfred Nowak and Charbord. It's part of the Elgar series on studies in human rights. Let's have a look at the book first. There it is. It's a hardback. There's the spine and then there's the back. There's a lot of detail. It's very much the style of Edward Elgar. The index at the back is by page numbering and you should be able to find stuff pretty easily there. It's quite a detailed index. And then you've got bibliography at the back. The bibliography is really quite important again because it actually covers a huge number of referencing points throughout the work. And then if you look at the work itself, you can see the footnoting throughout. Very substantial use of it. Sometimes there's paragraph numbering and sometimes there isn't. It depends on which chapter you're looking at. That's the actual Elgar Studies in Human Rights list of what they've actually published so far. And then there's the front page of the book itself. And then you've got the blurb about the book and the 8 chapters which make up the contents itself. Then after that we go into the list of contributors, of which there are a large number. You can see them listed there. And then we get into the introduction by Manfred and Anne, and it sets out very clearly what the book is about. And as I said, just going through it, you will see that there is some paragraph numbering, but the index at the back is about page numbering. Well, what do we say about the book? I got it on the basis that it was something that would be relevant for practitioners, and I think it is. We've given it our review title following: Can Human Rights-Based Measures Counteract International Terrorism? A crack team of experts argued the case. The answer to that, frankly, is probably yes, because one of the difficulties, it's certainly the view of quite a lot of the electorate, that clever dick lawyers go around using the Human Rights Act and human rights generally as a method of, to use the expression, getting people off, when in fact these are people who are out to destroy the fabric of a country. So you can see that the stakes are pretty high. That's a sort of general view. Whether it's true or not, I wouldn't like to make too much of a comment, but I think this book gives some perspective, using human rights to counter terrorism, gives some perspective on whether in fact the Human Rights Act is a sword or a shield, if you like, for the way we deal with terrorism, because some people claim that in fact it's assisting them rather than defeating them. So what do we say? Well, with terrorism and the threat of terrorism becoming increasingly frequent worldwide, this book posits an interesting thesis about what and what not to do about it. The result or results will be controversial, but nonetheless thought-provoking, and that's exactly what this book, I think, is intended to do. Looking at it from the point of view, say, of the criminal bar, there would be some concerns, certainly, about what the book is saying and about the way in which we go about dealing with the problem of people who commit terrorist offences, for instance, and the fact that they do use the Human Rights Act as a shield, and we really don't want them to do that. However, that's really about the way in which we, in our society based on the rule of law, carry out our criminal prosecutions. Now, this book has been recently published by Elgar, and it's a book which is a compendium of experts, giving us essays and articles and views. And the team is covered by an expert on international matters, headed by the co-authors Manfred Nowak and Charbord. So you've got a distinguished list of people who are involved as contributors. And as indicated by its title, the book asserts that terrorism may be countered by strict adherence to the principles of human rights, while admitting that terrorist acts constitute in themselves a gross violation of precisely such rights. So that's where the dichotomy, if you like, and where the problem really is. More controversial is the broad assertion that there is a wide spectrum of counter-terrorism measures, either punitive or preventative, that also violate human rights. Again, we've seen that recently with various allegations, which I'm not going to go into, concerning the behaviour of people like Jack Straw when he was Foreign Secretary, rendition and so forth. And these matters are still rumbling along, and they're not going to be solved in any short term at all. But you can see that the issues that are being raised are very fundamental ones about protecting society against international terrorism in particular. And the book, of course, seeks to demonstrate how and why many counter-terrorism measures have been unsuccessful, arguing that longer term a human rights centred approach is required therefore to average members of the public who might find themselves victimised by terrorist acts at any time or place. The expression longer term here might be just a tad worrying, and of course that is the problem, because we are entering a very new era in the way in which people are expressing their downright opposition to, for instance, here in the UK, the way we live our lives. But then it's not the easiest task to argue the toss on terrorism with an impressively high-powered team of experts who, from both theoretical and practical viewpoints, offer compelling arguments that most counter-terrorism measures will almost inevitably involve violations of human rights. And of course that's when the lawyers come into it. That's covering things such as digital surveillance, to drones, to torture. That's the Jack Straw issue, the latter being completely unacceptable, of course. And I'm not suggesting for any moments that anybody is culpable until anything is proved. But what I am saying is these issues have been raised, and this is why the book itself has got such a valued place just at the moment on the political agenda. And of course the general thesis is that when human rights are ignored or dismissed by states, more terrorist activity is the almost inevitable result. But whatever anti-terrorist measures are used, it is not unfair to say that they should be subjected to high standards of accountability. And interestingly, women's rights, which of course are human rights as well, are also discussed in some detail, as it has been widely observed that there is a direct correlation between what is termed hyper-masculinity and its attendant norms, including gender segregation, and a propensity toward radicalisation and ultimately terrorism. And again, you're getting into cultural issues and all sorts of other problems, religious issues and so forth. So you can see the jurisprudence of this is a big problem and will remain so, which is why this book, I think, is of some interest. Now, the book is indeed a valuable compilation of current thinking and research-based analysis on the causes and prevention of terrorism. It contains a wealth of references. I found them very useful, looking at it more as an academic exercise than a practical exercise, but certainly the referencing is great in the extensive footnoting for those who are interested, of course, in further research into what is a fraught subject, covering people like myself as lawyers to policymakers in government and at all various academic levels. I certainly see this book being of great value to a wide audience. So it has actually wider audience appeal. Let me conclude by saying this. It would also be interesting, I think, to elicit the opinions of those out there in the front line coping with terrorism and its horrifying results. Plenty of it going on, alas, across the planet. Obviously it covers people from medical personnel and the military to the fire service and the police. And with its range of carefully argued viewpoints, I think this is a book that will almost certainly engender quite a lot of spirited debate. And it's not going to go away, let's face it. So it's a book that's well worth reading. If you're either a political analyst, scientist or a lawyer, or someone who's generally interested in what is actually happening at the moment and the way forward, because I don't think there are very many answers, and I think this book, if anything, probably poses more questions than answers, but it's something that is definitely required reading for many people. And the publication date, of course, is cited at 2018. I'm recording this in the summer of 2018, a year after the big terrorist attacks we had in the UK during the general election. This is the book again, here it is. hardback. There's the spine and there's the back. Just opening it in the middle, you can see this is 1 step forward, 2 steps back. See, that's a chapter. Again, it's probably showing what is coming out of our review, and that is that for every move forward we seem to be going back, because the terrorist seems to be winning. So therefore, has the Human Rights Act and human rights as a concept, a tool, actually helped to counter terrorism, or done the opposite? And of course that's the argument. You can see the book has some very useful points, highly academic, much of it. There's the footnotes there. And as I mentioned before, do look at the back, because the bibliography is very substantial indeed. Anyway, big thank you to Manfred and Anne, very much indeed, for the book. And of course, as usual, to Edward Elgar. Your books are books I have a very high regard for, and I'm very grateful to be given the opportunity to review this book. Thank you very much for the work you do for us. Bye-bye.